the experience of initiation was begun. It could be called the experience of initiation, or in other places it was called illumination, but illumination is really the end product of the initiation work. Because initiation is by degrees. With initiation, you always start where we started this week, as human beings made up of the belief of good and evil, wholly governed by the belief of good and evil. Human beings who are partly good and partly bad, some more good than bad, some more bad than good, and some 50-50. But remember, these human beings have nothing and nobody but themselves. Anything that exists in their life exists at the standpoint of themselves or their friends or their relatives. They have no vision beyond this. Yes, beginning back in the pagan days, they began to worship God. You know why? It didn't rain that particular season, and they needed rain for their crops, and they couldn't humanly find a way to make it rain, and so somebody decided to look for a supernatural power that would bring forth what they needed, and so they invented God. Eventually, when the God didn't do all that was expected of him, they invented a second God. So they had a God for crops, and they had a God for fish, and they had a God for love. They had a God for fertility. They had many gods for many different things. And in their pagan way, they prayed, "Oh God, give me." When God didn't give them, they invented new ways of coercing God. They invented tithes. We'll give God 10%, he'll give us 90%. They invented sacrifices, animal sacrifices, dove sacrifices, eventually human sacrifices. Even as late as our Hebrew prophets, they were seriously considering sacrificing their children in a fire to appease God. Now, in one form or another, this way of getting into God's good graces or getting out of God what you want has been perpetuated, so that people still sacrifice or still promise God or tithe with God or do something in order to sort of make God loosen up, be a little more generous in outpouring. But while this was going on among the illiterate, the uninstructed, somewhere among them an individual came along who made a discovery. This may have been some desert traveler out under the blue skies, the great stars, the lonesome nights. It may have been a fisherman out on a little boat, toiling all night or all day, but inwardly pondering something or other. Who knows how it began? But this did happen. Somebody heard a still small voice. Somebody heard the voice say, "Be still. Be still and know that I am God." Oh, this is quite a revelation. He probably looked all around to find where that voice came from, and found himself alone, just as Moses must have been shocked when he heard that I am, and realized it was coming from within himself. So it is then, somewhere, sometime, truth was revealed in consciousness, and probably that individual found someone with whom to companion, with whom to tabernacle, someone who had an interest in it, and eventually the two went apart, and I suppose that is how the first school began. Eventually now we come to these schools of wisdom in which gradually has been revealed the truth of being. The truth of being is this, then. As human beings, we are cut off from God. We are not under the law of God. We live by might or by power. We live principally by bread, food, drink. And the first step that is revealed to us as we go into a wisdom school is this: you are in the dark. so far as truth is concerned, knowledge, wisdom, you know nothing of it. And therefore, you shall have a guide to go with you through these steps that you're going to take. And you yourself may have reliance in your guide, your instructor, your teacher. Follow where he leads. Fear nothing, because he has the key. He has the knowledge, the wisdom. Later on, this is explained to you. After you have had a while of having confidence in your guide, instructor, teacher, it is then revealed to you that what was really meant was that within you, unseen by you, within you is this teacher. Within you is the master. Within you is the light of truth. And you are to follow this light of truth which is within yourself. And it is in this way that you are first instructed that there is a God, and that this God doesn't have to be appeased. This God doesn't have to be prayed to. This God must be acknowledged as within you. One mystic saw it as closer to you than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. And so you receive your first lesson in the great truth that there is a God, then that you carry this God with you wherever you go. Paul could reveal later that neither life nor death could separate him from that God. And so it is that you begin your initiation with your attention turned to the fact that there is a God. And from there on, you learn to ponder this indwelling presence, power, spirit. You later learn to know it by many, many names. The Buddha, the Christ, Tao. But always you learn that it is within you. You also learn its function, that even though you are in darkness, you can trust it to go before you. It is the light. You learn later that it is your food, your bread, your meat, your wine, your water, that you do not have to labor for the meat which perisheth, because you have a meat that the world knows not of. Now you know. You need not labor for the meat that perisheth. You have meat that the world knows not. Only you know it. And you can't reveal it. It's not a teaching that you can go out and tell someone. You have experienced it. And because you have experienced it, you are now free of many of the worldly fears. Another thing, as you advance, you discover a great miracle. You discover that in this work, on this path, that as you go along, you become purified. Your consciousness becomes purified. If you have been accustomed to rough language, it becomes more refined. If you've been accustomed to swearing or hearing it, you get to a place where you just can't take it any longer. If you have laughed at a lot of funny, obscene jokes, you don't any longer. You find nothing funny in them. If you have enjoyed hours and hours of card playing, all of a sudden the joy is gone out of them. In other words, the world loses its attraction. Now, you haven't done anything to bring this about, and you haven't studied anything to bring this about. It's not a teaching. An experience has taken place within you. This Christ or Spirit of God has begun to come alive. Your soul center has begun to be opened, and you are now finding yourself more at home with people who are spiritually minded, with books of an inspirational and spiritual nature, scripture of the world, first perhaps your own scripture. Later on you begin to find the gems that are in the scriptures of the world, other inspirational writings. In other words, you have been elevated above that human consciousness. You are now partaking of the nature of divine consciousness. Oh, you haven't yet reached the absolute, but you are living in the divine consciousness. You are partaking of its nature. You are being fed and clothed by it. You are beginning to enjoy supply without such hard labor. You are finding more ideal companionships. the activity of this spirit within you is making of you a better human and is making of your human life a better life. Now, to most people, this is as far as they go on the spiritual path in any one lifetime, unless they have been this far in some previous existence and are now ready to go beyond it. Because now comes the period that is described in all mystical literature of the East and of the West as dying daily. This is the experience of putting off mortality and putting on immortality. And this, of course, is an experience in depth. It's an experience that comes to but few, but when it comes, it carries you further along the path of initiation up to illumination. The difficult part of it is that now that you've gotten to be such a good human being, you have to let the whole thing go. You have to lose your goodness. Not to become bad, I assure you. You have lost your badness, but now you lose your goodness. You may have been uncharitable, unthinking, unkind, and you have now become charitable and thoughtful and kind and generous. And now you've got to slay that. You've got to lose all of that. Now comes the difficult part of dying. It is revealed by the Master in his statement, "Why callest thou me good?" He had already died. You know when he died? Right after the 3 temptations in the wilderness. When, knowing that he was a master and could command powers, he was tempted to do it. Knowing that he had glimpsed the secrets of life and now could do many wonderful things, now comes the temptation to do it. Had he succumbed to that temptation, there would be no Christian religion today. There would be no Christian teaching, because he would have failed in the examination of his initiation. That is one of the initiation's experiences that everyone goes through on the way to the absolute. They reach the place where they are tempted to organize. They are tempted to bring in the fortune that's awaiting them if only they want to reach out for it. They are ready to accept the world's fame. That temptation comes to every single person on the spiritual path when they have reached the place where they're pretty good human beings, and now they're ready to shed their humanhood. And before they do, these temptations arise. You see, with a certain amount of illumination, it isn't difficult to gain fame. It isn't difficult to gain fortune. Many, many ways open to one who has attained some measure of spiritual light. And there's nothing wrong about name or fame that comes of its own accord. But when an individual uses the knowledge or power that has been given to him for that purpose, they're lost. And so it is that they come to a place of dying. They come to a place of renouncing any human effort to become famous or to become wealthy or to show forth great powers, to be known as a great power. There are other things, temptations along the way, because the entire humanhood must be renounced, so that it comes to an absolute point of realization that I of my own self am nothing. There is a spirit within me that doeth the works. There is a presence, there is a power. I am a beholder. I witness this invisible presence and power at work. I can watch how it goes before me to make the crooked places straight. I can see the many miracles it performs that I never could do. So it is with each person on this path that they come to that realization. Now, is initiation always a conscious experience? That is, one that takes place during waking consciousness. It is always a conscious experience, but it does not always take place during the waking hours, because consciousness is just as much awake in the sleeping hours as in the waking hours, and sometimes more so. There are times when we are more spiritually alert when we're sleeping than when we're waking, because in our waking hours, this sense of I gets in. I, me or mine. This sense of humanhood. And we are not always aware, we're not always hearing that still small voice or receptive. Whereas, as soon as we go to sleep and the conscious mind is resting, the mind that is concerned with I, me, and mine, the opportunity is there for divine revelation. And so it is that many of our very finest unfoldments and revelations come in sleep, not in dreaming, because we are fully awake even though we're sleeping. Fully awake, fully conscious, and yet sleeping. That is, so far as the physical senses are concerned. Now, the subject of initiation cannot be taken up in very great length in an hour, because there are so many phases and facets of it, and it goes over a period of so many years, and sometimes over a period of several lifetimes before the full and complete revelation is given. Now, as one ascends spiritually, they learn the secrets of the human mind. Let me tell you here that there are no psychologists, psychiatrists, or schools of such that have any knowledge of the human mind. None of them have ever even suspected the truth about the human mind. They have not even reached the kindergarten stage of a knowledge of the human mind. The human mind has been revealed to those who have attained spiritual light and wisdom, initiation, but there is no one in the scientific world, the medical scientific world, who would believe a word of it, and so it is never voiced to them. Beyond all doubt, they will eventually learn about it, and the knowledge is breaking through at this very moment. The knowledge is breaking through. None of them have it, but some of them are coming to the brink of it, because the human mind is not a power. The human mind is not a personal mind. You do not have a mind of your own, not even from a human standpoint. In other words, you haven't a mind that can become insane, because you have no different mind than everyone else has. And so if your mind could become insane, all the minds in the world would be just as insane. There is only one mind, and this is true even at the human level. And therefore, all ills must be treated not from the standpoint of you and your mind, but from the standpoint of the one mind. And this is revealed only when you are on the spiritual level looking down into the human mind. In other words, the higher you go in spiritual wisdom, the more you know about the human mind and body. Not in the sense of a doctor or a pathologist, no, but the human body as it is when it is separated from the carnal sense of body, the mortal sense of body. Because you see, we must have bodies, and we have, and our bodies are immortal. They are not finite, and they are not material. They are spiritual and immortal. And from the level of spiritual consciousness, you can see the nature of the mind and the body of man. Now, the first revelation that you receive on the subject of mind is that mind is not a power. That is why men destroy themselves using the mind as a power. the more they use the mind as a power, the more they are destroying themselves. Because the mind isn't a power. It is an avenue of awareness. With the mind we can know, but with the mind we cannot create. Now there are people who can use the mind to create something. They're just wrecking their mind by the misuse of the mind. Be assured of this. The mind is a most wonderful instrument. And shall I tell you something, that through the mind you have access to infinity? In other words, that which is you is consciousness. And that which is you is infinite consciousness. It is the all-knowing consciousness. It is the consciousness that embodies all of the knowledge and wisdom of the world. This consciousness which you are is that infinity. And you have access to that infinity through your mind. Just turn your mind within and let it receive. Don't use it as a power. Don't make it do something. Just turn within and let the divine consciousness which I am manifest itself through the mind to my individual awareness. In other words, back here is where I am. You remember, we found that we are not in the body. Therefore, I am somewhere not in the body, and I exist as infinite divine consciousness. I am as infinite as God, because I and my Father are one. I, the Father, and I, the Son, are one. Therefore, I am as infinite as God, but I don't have access to the infinity that I am, because I've been cut off by humanhood and taught to read a book to get knowledge, when I had it back here all of the time. Now, initiation then carries you to the awareness of this indwelling presence, the Spirit of God. It carries you to a place of relaxing, to let it perform that which is given you to do. Initiation carries you on and on and on, and purifies you to the extent that you no longer even seek God to destroy your enemies, but you're always willing to forgive your enemies. You love your enemies because you know that the only evil they're doing is through their ignorance. You can't blame one for ignorance. You are purified to the extent that you no longer wish to gain your way by any personal means of might or power. In one way after another, your life becomes purified, so that it is really a dedication to others. When this period of the dark night of the soul comes along, which is apt to last months and tear you apart, there comes the death of personal selfhood and the lifting into this higher consciousness. And in this experience, this is the revelation. You witness as if it were a tremendous light, or it may be a filmy cloud, a pillar of cloud. You witness it descending as if from above and taking form on earth as an individual. In other words, you witness God incarnating himself as man. And in this you witness, I, God, am now I, man. The Father has become the Son, and now I am. That I am He. I am He that should come. And in this revelation, there exists forever after what the world calls teacher, savior, guru, but which is really that light which is God manifested as man. And the power shown forth is the power of God, which appears to others to be the power of man. And that is why so often an individual has been set up and glorified as God. In other words, it wasn't seen that it wasn't a man who was God, but that God was the man. There's quite a difference. A man is never God, but God becomes the man. Now, while it is true that there have only been a few full and complete God incarnated as man on earth, there have been very many who have appeared as God incarnated on earth in some measure, great measure, tremendous measure. Otherwise the works they performed could not have been performed, because they were always works that a man couldn't have done. You can't ever imagine a man leaving the Gospel of John. You can't ever imagine a man leaving the Advaita Vedanta. You can't ever imagine a man leaving any of the great original teachings that were left. Now, this is the absolute, but you can see that it's not a teaching. You can see now that it is an experience. When it is given to you in words or book, it is a revelation, still not a teaching, because nobody can teach you to become it. But having been revealed to you, you can take it into your consciousness, and the very fact that you were present to hear it indicates that in some measure there was readiness to hear it. Thank you.